So clearly, driving does not seem to be important, right? If you go to the agent channel, right? Yeah.
Like maybe the residential proof is important because things go awry. I know where you live. I can hunt you down.
That's one story. I haven't heard that story before. Yeah, that's one possibility. I think there's a simpler explanation. Even that's actually interesting. I hadn't thought about that before. A simpler explanation is, look, imagine that there's a supervisor in charge of the driving license inspector. And they come around every afternoon and sort of check up on all their work, right? They can check all the paperwork and make sure it's all in order. But the driving test is very difficult for them to check, right? Because it's, it says, well, I took her out. She can drive. Like, we're all set, right? And like, what independent proof is there? There's no independent proof. Whereas here, there's an extra proof. And I think that actually could be even more important. OK, so what's a model that could potentially explain everything? So in the interest of time, let me just tell you what I think. So I think the following model could explain everything. Imagine that you go to the driver's license office on your own. You take they make you take the test, the driving test, right? So that explains the lesson group. The people who go and are better drivers are more likely to get their license. On the other hand, there's this agent system. You pay a high price. It has nothing to do with your driving ability. They go through the backdoor channels, and anybody can get a license. I think that would be consistent with basically all the results that they're having. There are sort of two systems kind of operating at once. There's like the honest system and the corrupt system. And in fact, one thing they talk about in the paper, which I won't go into now, but they may actually want to make the honest system kind of more onerous than it need to be to force people into the high-paying bribe system. Right? Imagine they may just sort of flunk people, and they have some evidence for this in the paper. They might want to flunk people who are actually good drivers in the official system every once in a while to sort of say, well, gee, if I really need my license quickly, I'm not going to take the risk of going through the official system. I'm going to go around through the backdoor channel. OK, questions? I think this is a nice paper because I think it shows you kind of the nuances of how these corrupt systems can actually work in reality. Yeah?
Do they end up getting rid of the agents? Are they still there? Or?
As far as I know, they're still there. But these agents are very common. Like, it's very difficult to get rid of the agents because you would have to have a rule saying they're not allowed to do anything for you. And I think that turns out to be a difficult. I don't know how you get rid of agents. I agree you could change the law. Agents seem to be kind of a robust phenomenon in many contexts.
Like 30% seems pretty big. Like, I feel like everyone must know what's going on if 30% of people are going through it, or more.
Yes. Yes, they may, and it may be hard to do something about it.
I'm just not understanding how the price columns work, right? So, like, just those numbers.
Sorry, these are prices conditional on saying yes. So if you say yes in column 2, they get a price.
The price for not being able to pay is.
Yeah, but I said it's 0. No, sorry. So this is a regression.
Okay, so it's changed.
This is a regression.
Okay.
So this is the constant term in the regression, and these are the coefficients on every additional. Yeah, so it's like 1,200 is the base case, and then we add these extra coefficients. Other questions? Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you know why these people can drive in these tests? I mean,
In the agent case?
I mean, in the survey?
Oh, in the survey they tested them.
Oh, okay.
Afterwards they took them on a driving test, and they paid them for their time or whatever.
But it's just immediately after this problem.
No, it's follow-up. It's like a month later or something, or 2 months later.
But then they can already have the license and already have been driving for 2 months. So this question is,
Yes, you're asking a great question. Yeah, that's a great point. I think it would go the other way around, right? So I think that would go against the finding of the bonus group, where basically people who were more likely to get their license should be better able to drive. Right? Because in your story, basically, the act of getting the license should make you a better driver. Right? And I think that's not what they find. But that's a really good point. Other questions? OK, so here's one last example of something similar. This is from my own work on corruption for truck drivers in Indonesia. And I'm not going to go through all the details of this paper, but there's just one thing that's kind of related to this efficiency question, which is overweight trucks. So I don't know if any of you have learned about this in Any of you are civil engineers. You probably know more about this than I do, but what I'm told is that the damage that trucks do to weight of to the weight of roads is highly convex in kind of the truck's weight. And as a result of that, and they basically figured this out by sort of building some test tracks and driving trucks around and around and around and around and sort of see kind of how quickly they deteriorated. On the other hand, this is a social damage to the owner of the road. It's not cost paid by the truck driver, so truck drivers are going to have a tendency to overload their trucks relative to what would be socially optimal. And given that this is a problem everywhere, that's why we put weight limits on trucks. It's one reason we put weight limits on trucks. The other is safety. And so the same thing happens in the US, for example. There are like weigh stations where they weigh trucks to make sure they're not overweight. So they're always weighed on trucks. So in Indonesia, the legal rule is that all trucks more than 5% over the weight limit basically pay a big cost. They're supposed to be ticketed. They take your license away. You have to go to court in a few days. They make your truck pull over and make you wait for 2 days. You have to unload all the cargo into a special storage shed. It's a big pain. Okay. So what happens with corruption? So in this study, for somewhat a different purpose, we had people sit in the passenger seat of the trucks and write down all the bribes they paid on this trip. Okay, and they paid a lot of bribes in this context. And in particular, we note what happened when they went through the weigh stations. So we had 300 trips. Only 3% of them received actual tickets at the weigh station, even though 84% of them were over the weight limit. And 42% of them were more than 50% over the weight limit. So if the weight limit is like, 20 tons, they're not 30 tons or whatever, right? They're substantially overweight, okay? And instead, they're paying bribes. So the question, though, is from an efficiency perspective, what do we need to know about this to think about efficiency?